The amount of COVID-19 news coming at us all is overwhelming, but a clear place for us to start this week is the governor's stay-at-home order. The depths of this crisis are now real to millions across the country, and including us here in New Mexico. There was no one left untouched by this, certainly. It's a heavy subject. We have a great panel to get at this. Joining us now remotely are line regular and attorney Laura Sanchez. Nice to see you on screen. Another regular with us this week is Tom Garrity of the Garrity Group PR. And we're joined also remotely by Lana Atkinson. She is professor in the UNM Political Science Department. Now, Tom, let me ask you first. You own a business. A lot of tough decisions being made out there by business owners to close their doors due to the governor's order. How have you handled it there at Garrity Group PR?
Well, one of the things we did was about 2 weeks ago, we moved to a telecommuting environment. And it was very easy to set up. We used some software through a provider, and we're able to get all of our key files remotely. And then, of course, we're already connected by way of chats. But it's definitely, provide a twist as far as how businesses do business. And we're fortunate in that, as a professional services company, we're able to, really work with our clients remotely. But we've had some pretty significant impacts as well. So we're, it's definitely a new normal. And I think that looking at how other small businesses have been impacted, whether it be really the restaurant industry, the tourism hospitality industry, really have had the script flipped for them. It's great to see that there's a lot of aid that is being promised anyway to really help those different types of businesses weather this particular storm.
My colleague Matt Grubbs will be talking with Workforce Solutions Manager Bill McCamley a little bit later about some of the things that are going to be set up for businesses here. It's going to be interesting to watch, no doubt. Lana, let me ask you this question as well. The tragic news of the first COVID-19 death we've had here in New Mexico certainly wasn't a surprise to anybody, but it still was shocking nonetheless in its own way. Particularly because he had, as the reporting has come in, he had wanted to get tested and he couldn't. And we're still having some trouble getting folks who want to get tested. It's an issue right now for us, isn't it? It's something we're going to have to punch through somehow. What's the best way the state should be handling that? We certainly can't take in everybody who walks in the door or calls who wants to be tested. How do we sort this out at this point?
Yeah, we need to have a priority list, and that priority list needs to be a little bigger, I think, than just the CDC requirements that you meet one of these goals, because we're really not understanding at all what that numerator looks like. And that sure would help us, think about the trajectory of the virus if we had more information. So not having kits to test is a serious issue across the country. And, we passed legislation. I remember Representative Pelosi testing. Where are the tests?
It's a tough one. Laura Sanchez, the idea that we're all physically distancing. That's the new term, not social distancing, but physical distancing, I'm reading. And now we've got this pressure certainly coming out of the White House saying, look, somehow we've got an Easter deadline. But the infamous Dr. Fauci is saying, look, the virus doesn't work on a timetable made by man. It's going to be in its own deal. What's the best way here in New Mexico? Is the governor on the right track, regardless of what the federal government wants to do? Are we on the right track here in your gut from everything you've seen from the governor so far?
There's been so much confusion, I think, out there. And unfortunately, a lot of confusion, even within the White House task force that's working on this. I do think that there's no reason to set arbitrary timelines. I think that causes more confusion for people. Obviously, we'd all like for this to be lifted by Easter. And certainly a lot of restaurant workers, people in the hospitality industry, a lot of folks in retail would love to get back to work. Excuse me, but I don't know that I agree with Dr. Fauci. We can't just impose some sort of arbitrary timeline. We have to be prudent in this situation. I think the governor's on the right track as far as, making sure people understand that this is a very serious issue and we all need to take precautions and do what we can to stay safe. But what's interesting is when you asked the question earlier about the gentleman who passed away in Eddy County, I mean, there's so much confusion even around that, because I had heard that he actually had declined the coronavirus test at first, not that it wasn't available to him.
You're quite right.
But I'm hearing a lot of conflicting things too. And people even in that area who I know also had heard different things, that it had come from a doctor. And then the media said, actually the doctor didn't have direct contact. So there's just a lot of confusion, and that leads to a lot of fear. So I think the best thing that we can do is just be patient, get through the day, do what we can, and really be kind to one another.
Tom, let me ask you the same question roughly about what the president wants to do about getting the economy started again. Look, no one will disagree that the economy going to a very low place is not good for anybody, but death is probably a little bit worse than that if you really want to get down to it. But is there, in fact, a way in your mind, Tom Garrity, to have certain businesses sort of roll back in after a couple of weeks? Or is that just folly to think that we can kind of tiptoe into this thing?
Well, the ordering really should be more focused on, how do we make sure that people get the tests that they need to get? How do we make sure we get the virus under control or to a manageable level of eliminating, flattening the curve? So, once those items are addressed, then I think you can go back to saying, okay, what does the new normal kind of look like at that point? I think that, looking ahead, sure, a lot of us want to be able to see business, get back on track and, all of us address this recession head on. But really, we have to make sure that we do it in a safe way. So to put, businesses ahead right now, while personally I would like to see that, it's really not a move that appears anyway that would be, conducive with flattening that curve of infections and people seeking admission into hospitals.
Lana, let me ask you this about what's been going on Capitol Hill. We had our Senator Udall mentioning yesterday on the floor that $1.25 billion for state and local governments is going to be out there. New Mexico is going to get its share, and there's going to be monies, of course, I shouldn't say of course, I'm actually should say gratefully for tribes and other folks who might be overlooked otherwise. The early back of the envelope numbers, does this hit you as something that's workable for New Mexico, or is this just a first cut as far as you're concerned? Well, how do the numbers shape up for you as you see them so far?
I think that this is just a first cut for the nation. I mean, you can't have the economy go into the bowels that it's gone into and not think that there's going to have to be further efforts on the part of the national government to resolve the issues that are taking place at an individual and household level with regard to the economy. And how is the state going to go about delivering that to the people?
There's an $8 billion tribal government relief fund to ensure Indian tribes have direct one-stop access to COVID-19 resources. I mean, folks are being taken care of on the front end here, but the implementation's always the tricky part, especially when it comes to non-traditional communities where we here in New Mexico, of course, always have trouble getting monies to those folks. This is a new way of doing this, though. Do you anticipate the state is ready to receive, ready to disperse, all that kind of a thing? Or do you, in your gut, does it feel like we're ready to go with the money that's going to be coming?
Well, I don't know if we're ready to go, but we certainly have a list of priorities, and we know where to head that money. So I think the governor is on track in that way to think about those things and to make those decisions and to get that to people as quick as possible.
Laura Sanchez,
So, Jean,
please go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to comment on that. I mean,
Please.
one of the scariest, I think, things happening more recently with Navajo Nation is that they're seeing a huge increase in the numbers there, and they're a very rural area, already have trouble with adequate health care and serious problems in terms of connectivity, in terms of being able to access the internet. So the idea of working from home just isn't very conducive with the Navajo Nation. So there's also, I think, a question legally about whether the stay-at-home orders that the governor issues actually are applied to Navajo, because it's a sovereign nation.
Right.
And so I know that the president of Navajo Nation has been very concerned about this, obviously made it a big priority, and are doing what they can to communicate with chapter houses and other members of the nation. But in terms of getting the right resources there, even testing kits, all of that, it becomes a very difficult problem because of how spread out the nation is and how a lot of the families live in such close quarters that the social distancing can be a real challenge for a lot of families.
Good point.
So that's a huge issue that I know the Navajo Nation is dealing with right now.
We have to leave that there for now. When we come back to the line looks at how and when the state pays for its COVID-19 response.